So, in the novel, the first challenge you encountered, what was that?
The first one was the death of Wellington. He was the black poodle that belonged to Mrs. Shears, who was my neighbour at the time. And then it was the police officer arresting me.
And why, Christopher, were you arrested?
Because I hit him.
And why did you hit him?
Because he grabbed me and I don't like to be touched.
So, let's track back to Wellington, Poodle. His death was the whole reason why you started writing The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime.
Yes, and I like mystery novels. And I wanted to write one just like Sherlock Holmes.
And writing this novel is what led you on this adventure. Your father instructed you not to write it, and then he hid it. You looked for it, found it, but you also found something else. What was that?
Yes, well, while I was looking in my dad's closet, I saw all these letters from my mother.
This is the mother that you presumed was dead at the time?
Yes.
And how did you feel when you found these letters?
Well, I was confused because the date on the letters were months after my mother had died. And I had another mystery to solve, so I was actually kind of excited. And then I read more, and then I started to feel sick. I mean, my mother was alive, and my father had lied to me. I just didn't feel very well.
That's understandable. What happened after that?
Well, I found out that father had killed Wellington, and I couldn't trust him anymore. So I brought my special food box and my pet rat. His name was Toby, and he's dead now. And then I hid in the garden shed, and then I ate 2 clementines and a Milky Bar. And I slept there for the night, and my father couldn't find me. And then that's where I decided to live with my mother in London, because I wasn't safe here with my father anymore.
So you took the train to London to live with your mother?
Yes, I took the train all by myself. I mean, it was kind of scary, and my father, he called the police, and they were after me. And when I was on the train, I was seeing all these different things, and that made my brain hurt, and then I had to close my eyes and put my hands over my ears and start groaning, because for me, groaning is like pressing Control or Delete on the computer.
Okay, so you eventually found your mother and stayed with her for a while and Mr. Shears. But things started to get rough, and the two of you moved back to Swindon, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Shears wasn't too good about the whole thing. And when I went back to Swindon, I took my A-level maths, and I got an A, which is the highest you can get. And my mother, she bought a place that, well, I didn't really like it, and father got me Sandy to stay at his house because mother's was too small and Sandy is my dog. And I began to feel safer at father's with Sandy there. When it was time for me to go to university, my mother and father got a place for all of us to live, because mother and father weren't mad at each other anymore, and it was frustrating because everything was different. But Siobhan said to me before I left Swindon that sometimes change is good, especially if I'm going to university to study to be a scientist. And I knew I could do that only because Siobhan, not only because Siobhan, but because I solved the mystery of Wellington and I found my mother.
And Siobhan is the teacher at your school, is she?
Yes, and she helped me through a lot. I thank her.
She also convinced you to write this book, didn't she?
She did.
Well, I'm thankful for Siobhan and you as well. I'll be speaking to Christopher's mother and father later, and about his challenges that he encountered. So first, I'd like to say that Christopher certainly is amazing. How was his childhood?
It was rough.
Oh really? How so?
Christopher was a challenge himself, yet she was challenged taking care of him as well.
I couldn't handle him. We would go out on outings to the shopping centre or friends, and he would have these fits that I could not control. It was very frustrating. We
We were fighting, which wasn't good for Christopher.
Mr. Shears convinced me to move to London with him. That's one of the reasons that I left. The other was that I wasn't good for Christopher. He could handle him so much better than I could. He could calm him down.
I couldn't bear to tell Christopher any of this, so I told him his mother was dead, which was stupid, and he left and went away. It was all my fault. But no child, especially Christopher, should ever have to endure anything like that, even if it benefits them.
So, were you at all surprised as to how Christopher handled these problems?
Christopher thinks in the way that he does what he needs to do in order to be safe. Apparently, being away from me made him feel safe, and was logically the best answer for him. I wasn't surprised as to how he reacted to these conflicts. I was surprised, though, that he actually successfully went through with them.